Once upon a time, terrible transfers were one of the most enjoyable things about football. It would be the stuff of legends, the majority of your club's transfer budget spent on a striker you've never heard of before, all the hope and expectation resting on this guy's shoulders, and he would turn up and he would be crap. Could not hit a barn door. 12 months later, he's gone on loan to Turkey and you've never heard of him again. The only time he'd get mentioned is when you're in the pub and someone goes, do you remember that guy? It was good stuff, and once upon a time, if a big move like that didn't work out, it would have a detrimental impact on that team. But nowadays, because of the amount of money in modern football, if a team spends £100 million and it doesn't work out, hardly anyone bats an eyelid. We all just move on and wait for the next big money move to happen. So for a transfer to be considered a complete and utter disaster in modern day football, it needs to be something special. Well, how about this? What if I were to tell you there's a player who cost £40 million for just 48 minutes of football? That's £800,000 per minute. He cost £3.6 million per touch of the ball. So who was the man at the centre of this catastrophic transfer? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Jean-Kévin Augustin to Leeds United. Augustin was born in Paris in 1997 and came through the academy at PSG. The striker made his debut for the first team in 2015 at the age of 17, coming on as a sub to play up front alongside Zlatan Ibrahimovic. This was the early days of PSG under Qatari ownership, and despite their star-studded squad, Augustin was one of the rare academy players to be mixing it with the first team. In the summer of 2016, he finished as top goalscorer for France under-19s as they won the European Championship. He scored more goals than Kylian Mbappe. He would continue to make a handful of appearances for PSG, but surprisingly found his game time limited behind Zlatan and Edinson Cavani. However, he would get his opportunity elsewhere. In 2017, at the age of 20, he moved to RB Leipzig for £11 million, and it was here where he started to make a name for himself. In his first season, he got 12 goals and 6 assists, averaging a goal contribution every 91 minutes in the league. He was also playing regularly for France under-21s. Really promising stuff for someone of his age, and this led to him being one of the most hotly sought after young strikers in Europe, attracting interest from across the continent. But his second season at Leipzig wasn't as successful. You see, Augustin was publicly criticised by new manager Ralf Rangnick for returning from his summer holidays unfit. He was then disciplined by the club for using his mobile phone before a Europa League game. It meant in the 2018-19 season, he barely started, used almost exclusively as a sub for the entire season. So the following season, he moved on loan to Monaco in the summer of 2019, a move which didn't work out for Jean-Kévin either. He started just twice in 10 league appearances, failing to score. That loan was cut short in January 2020 so he could move to England with Leeds United. And boy oh boy, this is where our story properly gets underway. Augustin was announced just days before the end of the January transfer window in a loan deal with an obligation to buy for £18 million if Leeds United got promoted to the Premier League. Emphasis on the word obligation there. That's going to be very important later on in the story. Now, at the time, Leeds were in the automatic promotion places. One problem they had, though, was putting away chances. They were creating loads, just struggling to score them. That's where they were hoping Augustin was going to be the difference maker. And the move was met with huge fanfare. Leeds fans were buzzing to see what their new man could do. Manager at the time, Marcelo Bielsa, personally approved the transfer, even going as far to say that in peak form, Augustin would be worth £40 million. So how'd he get on? Well, let's have a look. Nearly 2 weeks after joining, he would make his official debut against Nottingham Forest, coming on as a sub in the 70th minute. In that 20 minutes, he had 6 touches. 2 shots though, that's not too bad, none of them on target, but you know, it's his debut in a new league, you can't expect too much, can you? So on to his second game away at Brentford. Jean-Kévin comes on as a sub in the 75th minute and 3 touches in 15 minutes. No shots, no dribbles, 2 completed passes. It's all right. It's just his second game. It's his second game. There's still loads of time. He's probably still adapting to things, right? Let's give him a break. Game number 3. Come on, at home to Bristol City. Leeds 1-0 up and another sub appearance for Jean-Kévin. 74th minute and 5 touches, 1 shot, not on target, not even a completed pass. What's going on here? Not really gone to plan so far, this move, has it? And in Leeds' next game against Reading, he doesn't even come off the bench. So not exactly living up to the billing. But look, it's still early days, I guess. There's always the next... Oh, well, that's not ideal. But hopefully when he comes back, he'll be able to... Oh yeah, that thing. So just as Augustin was coming back to fitness, a big global pandemic happened, meaning there was no championship football for 3 months. After the most painful, excruciating 3 months of your life, football finally returned in mid-June 2020. But one thing that didn't return was Jean-Kévin Augustin. Leeds games went by one, and each time he wasn't included in the squad. Bielsa repeatedly told the media it was down to injuries. Now it gets to the end of June, and in most seasons loan deals officially end on June the 30th, but because of the coronavirus pandemic extending the season, it meant that any loans had to be extended if a club wanted to keep a player. And Leeds did that with several of their loan players, Elland Road, Ben White, Helder Costa, Jack Harrison, but not Jean-Kévin Augustin. Why was that? Was it purely down to injury? Well, it didn't seem to be. Former Leeds striker Jermaine Beckford, is still very well connected to the club, claims he heard from multiple sources that it was because Augustin didn't work hard enough in training, as well as not following instructions from management. So for the remainder of the 2019-20 season, Augustin was left in limbo, as Leeds went on to win the Championship and get promoted back to the Premier League. But wait a minute, Leeds were meant to sign Augustin permanently for £18 million if they won promotion to the Premier League. So what happens now? Well, this is where it all starts to kick off. So because the loan deal had officially ended on June the 30th and Leeds didn't get officially promoted until July, they claimed that meant the obligation to buy Augustin had elapsed and they were no longer legally required to sign him. Unsurprisingly, Leipzig didn't agree with that. They took legal action against Leeds and even filed a complaint with FIFA, who a year later officially sided with Leipzig and told Leeds to pay the fee in full. Leeds appealed against that decision and took the case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, who after 16 months also sided with Leipzig. It wasn't until December 2022 that Leeds and Leipzig came to an agreement to end the dispute. So nearly 3 years after the transfer was initially agreed and a series of legal battles along the way, Leeds United eventually agreed to pay Leipzig £15.5 million. That's £2.5 million less than they were supposed to. Doesn't really feel like it was worth the hassle, does it? By the way, kind of ironic that just a couple of years later, Leeds and Red Bull would be associated with each other. But the crazy thing is, Leeds paid an 8-figure fee for a player and didn't even get to keep him because they agreed to relinquish any claim to owning him as a player in October 2020. And if you think that's the end of the saga, we're not done just yet, because with all this bickering between two clubs, we're forgetting the main man himself here. Jean-Kévin Augustin! Because you see, when a club agrees a loan deal with an obligation to buy, they also have to agree a contract with that player. The contract that was agreed with Augustin? £93,000 a week for 5 years, with a £2.5 million signing fee on top. And so Augustin himself claimed that Leeds owed him money. FIFA's dispute resolution chamber sided with him and ordered Leeds to pay £24.5 million. Leeds once again appealed that decision to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. However, in April 2024, they withdrew that appeal. And so in total, Leeds United paid £40 million to a player who played just 48 minutes of football for them. That's 15.5 million going to RB Leipzig and 24.5 million going to Jean-Kévin Augustin himself. It's a truly remarkable and unique saga which made Augustin the most expensive player in the history of football in terms of cost per minute. But who's to blame here? Obviously you have to look at Leeds themselves, namely the director of football at the time, Victor Orta. He was the one who sanctioned the deal and was presumably the one who was leading Leeds in trying to worm their way out of it once they realised what a big mistake they had made. Around £18 million for a young striker who was coming off the back of a bad 18 months, had only really had one good season in senior football under his belt and also had several question marks against his attitude. It was always a very risky deal to make. And yes, if Leeds got to the Premier League, £18 million was a drop in the ocean compared to what they get for simply being in the Premier League. But a 5-year contract. A 5-year contract. He would still be contracted to the club now on 93 grand a week if that deal was allowed to happen. So it was a bonkers transfer to make in the first place, but the other person to blame here is Augustin himself. It's been mentioned already in this video how there were reportedly multiple issues with his attitude. At Leipzig, he came back from his holiday unfit, he was on his mobile phone before a Europa League game. Those things pretty much ended his career at Leipzig, and he was only 21 at the time. And then when he was at Leeds, he had similar issues, being banded around, not training hard enough, not listening to the manager. You're absolutely mad doing that to Marcelo Bielsa, by the way. It sounds as if he didn't help himself with how he approached things at Leeds, and since then his career has gone downhill. Augustin moved to French side Nantes as a free agent in October 2020 after both Leeds and Leipzig relinquished any claim to owning him as a player, but after playing just 34 minutes of football, he vanished once again. Nantes put out a club statement revealing that Augustin had been suffering from long COVID. Whether it was completely down to that or not, he didn't play a single game in the entirety of 2021. I don't want to downplay the severity of something like long COVID, but considering what we know about Augustin and his disciplinary issues, you can make your own assumptions there. He eventually returned for the French side in 2022, making a handful of appearances off the bench before then leaving the club. All in all, he spent 20 months at Nantes and played a total of just 112 minutes of league football. Augustin then moved to Basel in Switzerland, where he managed to feature a lot more. He played 29 games in his first season there, even starting in both legs of the Europa Conference League semi-finals. His second season wasn't as successful. He was in and out of the team before not being selected in the final 8 squads of the season and even being excluded from training. Eventually his contract was cancelled with a year still to run in it. Augustin then spent 7 months without a club before joining Polish side Motor Lublin this past March. He would play just 4 games before getting injured and then being released again. So 5 years after that very costly move for Leeds United, and Jean-Kévin Augustin is without a club at the age of 28, having last played in the Polish league. And look, while it's all fun and games having a little laugh at how costly this move was for very little return, it's also a very sad ending. This was a player with so much potential, and because of some injuries, some bad luck, but seemingly mostly a poor attitude, it's all gone to waste. And now Jean-Kévin Augustin is the guy that Leeds fans are going to be talking about in the pub for years to come, saying, "Oh, do you remember him?" And it just compounds how bad a transfer this was. £40 million spent. £3.6 million per touch of the ball. Around £800,000 per minute played. £14,000 per second. And so this has been the story behind the worst transfer in the history of football, Jean-Kévin Augustin to Leeds United. What do you think? Are there any other transfers which come close to being as bad as this? Let me know in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this. I've been Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier, and a big thank you for watching.
That's money, money, that's money, money. We used to walk the street and it's money, money.